This is the Democrat and the Biden administration's effort to erase our history, just as they have done to the statue of Robert E. Lee.
This only pertains to monuments that commemorate the founding fathers.
So just to clear up a couple of things, my colleague mentioned the founding fathers. Robert E. Lee was not actually one of the founding fathers. He was a general of the Confederacy. That was the city of Charlottesville. That wasn't a national monument when that statue was removed.
Wow, that Marjorie Taylor Greene highlight reel is really picking up steam, ain't it?
Is that what we're really going to see come out? Is it true? Is the type of corruption we're going to see come out? Is it going to be satanic worship?
Marge found herself making headlines once again for all the wrong reasons. Once again. No, not for struggling to count outside her fingers and toes.
What it did to our children's math and reading levels is horrific. School closures brought them to the lowest levels in years. English 8th graders, math proficiency dropped by 7 points. Reading levels dropped by 2 points. There are 1,524,524 and 481. This is over 1 million.
No, not for supporting Q. We've been there. No, not for thinking that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a body double.
It's a whole new person.
Almost like a body double, like Hillary Clinton.
Ruth?
Yeah, like the body double for Hillary Clinton. So it's interesting. So
I do not believe that was Ruth. No.
Or any of her mega hits that were outlined one by one recently and entered into record on the House floor.
Whereas Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has repeatedly fanned the flames of racism, anti-Semitism, hate speech against the LGBTQ community, Islamophobia, Asian hate, xenophobia, and other forms of hatred.
But for failing to comprehend American history, particularly on the Confederacy. And I know I'm surprised as well. We'd all imagine that she would be very well versed on the subject matter. But onto her defense and reference of Robert E. Lee and the subsequent takedown from Congresswoman Pingree. It was on hand to bring her up to speed on her racist history.
Chairman, my friend and gentlewoman from Maine may have mentioned that this affects all monuments. In fact, it does not. As a former secretary, monuments are under the Antiquities Act. There's about 163, as I recall. This only pertains to monuments that commemorate the founding fathers of the United States on land under the jurisdiction. I don't recall how many monuments are to the founding fathers, but there's not many.
But I want to be clear. Let me read this back to you. There may have been an earlier version of this, but this one says, none of the funds made available by this act may be used to remove any monument on land under the jurisdiction of the Department of Interior. I reserve.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Actually, there should be no funds allocated to remove any monument, and there's no necessary reason to remove the monuments. This is the Democrat and the Biden administration's effort to erase our history, just as they have done to the statue of Robert E. Lee. This is an outrage.
So just to clear up a couple of things, my colleague mentioned the founding fathers. Robert E. Lee was not actually one of the founding fathers. He was a general of the Confederacy. That was the city of Charlottesville. That wasn't a national monument when that statue was removed. And I just have to say, I find it rich that the party that has supported book banning in our libraries, rewriting curriculum, not talking about our history over and over again, is the very one that is saying that we have to often keep painful monuments in places where they do damage, where they interfere with people's ability to enjoy the particular area that they're in, and leave it to the Department of Interior to have that discretion. So if we're going to get into talking about book banning and rewriting history, let's have an honest debate about it and talk about the differences between our two parties on this. I oppose this amendment and I yield back.
Let me just say for the last time, there is a difference between honoring history and remembering history. There are no Hitler statues in Germany, and the last I checked, people remembered him just fine. Confederate monuments are not about remembering history. In fact, I made a video on this very subject matter. Before I get into this, I'm not here to spark some debate where people defend the Confederacy by saying things like, well, it was about states' rights, because there's only one response to that. States' rights to do what? But as with this school and any school across America that is named after or celebrates the Confederacy, my mind goes immediately to the position of, imagine what it's like to be a black student forced to go to a school like that or to walk through these doors. And there will be those that say this is about remembering history, which I say that's bullshit. Confederate flags, monuments, naming schools after Confederate generals, these are all efforts to celebrate them historically. First of all, because the majority of Confederate monuments were built in the early 1900s, long after the war. Coincidentally, around the same time that the NAACP was formed, and, well, the South were enacting sweeping laws to disenfranchise black people. Now, as the schools being named after the Confederacy, well, there was a spike between 1954 and 1970. What happened in 1954 again? Oh, that's right. Brown versus Board of Education. A decision which said maintaining racially segregated schools was unconstitutional. So this is why I don't humor the bullshit about it being something to remember history, especially when it often comes from the very people who want to ban books that look to teach people on the past atrocities of this country. Go to Germany. Show me where the statues of Hitler are, or monuments or schools that are honoring the Nazis. You won't find them. But somehow we still remember that part of history, right? But for talking sakes, let's say that there were. How do you think Jewish kids would feel if they had to go to a school with a Nazi flag painted on the door, or a school that was named after leaders of the Nazi party? It wouldn't be right? So why is this? And here's the thing, is anybody surprised that she doesn't know who the founding fathers are? That she imagines Robert E. Lee was one of them because he stood for the very same things that she clearly upholds close to her heart? Of course not. This woman is so unqualified for office that her own party members can't help but remind the general public when they're asked about her.
So George, when I was teaching law school, I learned and taught certain constitutional principles. When Marjorie Taylor Greene was teaching CrossFit, she learned a whole different set of values, evidently, because my idea of what this country should be like is based on the Constitution. And she sees the world differently. She's criticized me for, voting to certify the election in 2020. The Constitution says Congress shall count the votes. It doesn't say Congress may overturn an election result. It doesn't say Congress can do whatever the heck it wants with this election. Shall count the votes. That's what the Constitution says. In her CrossFit class, maybe they didn't cover that.
So we can just add this to the tape. And at this point, between her and Lauren Boebert, it's a race to the finish for who can be the most insufferable and simply idiotic member of office.
Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene forthwith present herself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene be censured with the public reading of this resolution.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.